Welcome back to the channel. I am your humble host, D-Base. Yes, that's talent, all known from Kolob. How did the LDS Church hide hundreds of billions of dollars from the federal government? Well, it all started in 1997, and I'm going to give you the complete history of the sham. Now, by way of background, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission fined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints after the agency determined that the church directed its church-owned fiduciary, Ensign Peak Advisors, to hide from the public how much the church held in public stocks. Now, the $5 million fine that the SEC levied against the church and its fiduciary is less than 1% of the wealth that the church and Ensign Peak Advisors hid from the government since 1997, and that's according to the SEC documents. The ruse was built upon a series of diversionary filings designed to hide from the public the true value of the church's equity holdings, according to the SEC. Now, by 2020, the government agency said that the misleading portfolio filings hid from the public that the church had holdings in excess of $40 billion. According to the SEC's website and the order filed against the church and Ensign Peak, the forms at issue are required by law every 3 months when investment managers oversee and trade on a national exchange at least $100 million in securities. In a press release responding to the fine and the order, the church acknowledged that it was contacted by the SEC in 2019 and eventually adjusted its approach to the filings. Let's read from the public statement that the church issued right after that.
We affirm our commitment to comply with the law, regret mistakes made, and now consider this matter closed.
And here is that full Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints statement. And the church press office also wrote a Q&A on the fine, which you're seeing right now. Feel free to pause the screen. There was a 22-year time span between when Ensign Peak Advisors was founded and when the church finally came clean about its duplicitous practices. There's a huge history that goes behind this entire debacle, including leaks in May of 2018. And we're going to give you the complete history of Ensign Peak, how it was founded, how it broke the law, and how generations of Mormon leaders deceived their flock and the federal government. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup, your go-to source for the latest headlines and critical analysis on all things LDS.
Breaking news!
Join D-Vase,
Mormon News Roundup.
that's talent on loan from Kolob, every Sunday and Monday night.
We will uncover the truth behind the news that matters most to the Mormon community.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints created a nonprofit corporation known as Ensign Peak Advisors. It is what is known as an integrated auxiliary intended to manage the church's investment portfolio. According to the SEC filing, Ensign Peak has no members or even shareholders. Based in Salt Lake City, Utah, where church headquarters resides, Ensign Peak is governed by a board of trustees consisting of a member of the church's presiding bishopric and the managing director. They are appointed by and report to the leadership, otherwise known as the First Presidency. The First Presidency consists of 3 men. The prophet, who's known as the head of the church, and his 2 counselors. The presiding bishopric includes 3 other men who counsel and work under the direction of the First Presidency. These individuals manage the church's investment portfolio, or what the church calls reserves or invested reserves. The monies in Ensign Peak include U.S. equity and debt securities purchased with excess tithing, income, and returns generated by Ensign Peak, and the assets of other church integrated auxiliaries according to the SEC filing. According to the court order, Ensign Peak does not charge any management fees to the church itself. And due to a law passed in 1940, the nonprofit is exempt from registering as an investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Let's read from the SEC's website.
Institutional investment managers that use the United States mail, or other means or instrumentality of interstate commerce, in the course of their business, and that exercise investment discretion over $100 million or more in Section 13F securities must file Form 13F.
These 13F forms disclose equity holdings available to the public and are required to be filed every 3 months, or every quarter as per the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. Now, when Ensign Peak was first founded, it managed about $7 billion in church assets according to the SEC filing. And the government has stated in the court order that a significant percentage of that $7 billion consisted of 13F securities. Within a year of its creation, Ensign Peak senior managers understand the requirement to file these 13F forms, and this is explained to senior church leadership, again from the SEC filing.
To prevent disclosure of the securities portfolio managed by Ensign Peak, the church approved Ensign Peak's plan of using other entities to file Forms 13F.
And once again from the SEC filing.
The church was concerned that disclosure of the assets in the name of Ensign Peak, a known church affiliate, would lead to negative consequences in light of the size of the church's portfolio.
A trust fund is created by the church, along with a separate LLC under the trust's ownership after Ensign Peak recommends and senior church leadership approves the action that the LLC would file the required 13F forms. This would be the original LLC of what the SEC described in its filings as clone ones that are created over the next 18 years to avoid connections to Ensign Peak in the church. The SEC said the managing director of Ensign Peak was named as the trustee, and this LLC had a registered address in Glendale, California. But according to the SEC, it did not conduct any business at that site. An investment management agreement, or IMA, was signed with this LLC, with employees at Ensign Peak Advisors assigned as its managers. Now, despite this IMA, Ensign Peak Advisors did not transfer investment discretion to this new LLC. IMAs grant managers of LLCs the discretion and authority to manage the money. In its order, the SEC states that even though the IMA paperwork stated clone LLCs would have management authority, none of them ever exercised investment discretion over the church's assets. On February 26, 2003, a new 13F is filed under the name of a newly created LLC. This was for the accounting year 2002. In March of 2005, the Mormon Church identified that the public could link the first LLC to the church because the person signing the forms was listed in a public directory as a church employee. So to once again avoid public disclosure, senior leaders of the church approved the creation of a new reporting entity. This time with better care being taken to ensure that neither the street nor the media could connect the new entity to Ensign Peak. In December, a second LLC is created as a nonprofit in Wilmington, Delaware. The managing director of Ensign Peak is named as the general manager, and the 13 Fs are filed under the new LLC's name. Concerned by the growth of its portfolio becoming so big that the use of the second name could bring unwanted attention per the SEC, Ensign Peak advises and gets approval from the church to clone the second LLC and add new ones to file 13F forms. With the blessings of church leadership, 5 new LLCs are created using the Delaware address. Though just like the California LLC, no business is conducted in the state. The first of 2 church audit department reviews highlighted the risk that the SEC might disagree with the approach that the church was taking. But according to the SEC, the church auditing department didn't recommend any changes to the church's LLC strategy. Ensign Peak is made aware that an unnamed third party was able to connect the holdings of some LLCs back to the nonprofit. So the issue was once again taken to senior church leadership, and they approved Ensign Peak's advice once again, namely to gradually and carefully adapt Ensign Peak's corporate structure to strengthen the portfolio's confidentiality. By November, senior members of the church approved Ensign Peak's idea to add even more clone LLCs to the portfolio. That brought the total of clone LLCs created by Ensign Peak and approved by senior church leadership to 12. Ensign Peak dedicated business managers to each of these entities, and many of those managers were church employees, though the order does not specify exactly how many. And the criteria for selection to become these fake business managers? Well, let's read from the SEC statement again.
They had common names and a limited presence on social media, and were therefore less likely to be publicly connected to Ensign Peak or the church.
Those business managers weren't provided with much information about the money that they were allegedly managing or the clone LLCs to begin with, or why those clone companies were even produced. Now, these clone LLCs were given addresses outside of church headquarters in Utah, and none of them conducted any business at their designated locations, with the exception that they did receive mail and had an answering service that went straight to voicemail. Any recordings left by regulatory agencies were to be sent to an Ensign Peak senior manager. Other voicemails that were left were to be deleted. And the fake business managers of these entities, when they were provided with the 13F forms, they weren't given the full complete picture. They weren't given the complete documents, just the signature pages. Now, at least annually, the managing director of Ensign Peak would meet with senior church leadership, including the presiding bishopric and the first presidency. It took unanimous approval from those 6 men who comprised those 2 groups before Ensign Peak could shift its strategy on the LLC structure and filing of 13F forms. The church auditing department conducts a second review of Ensign Peak. Of course, the members were not told about any of these irregularities. Now, it was at this time that Mormon Leaks connected these 13 clone companies with domains that were hosted by church servers. That included the church's main website, lds.org, and mormon.org.
They have uncovered 13 LLCs tied to the LDS Church. They linked each LLC to the LDS Church by using the domain names, which are registered to the organization tasked with legally protecting all their intelligence property. The domains are located on servers that belong to the LDS Church. Each business had to file a form with the Securities and Exchange Commission that lists investment managers over $100 million in assets. Each of these forms lists a business manager that also an employee of the LDS Church.
Mormon Leaks published the 13F forms showing that the church had assets in excess of $40 billion. And the website also connects business managers of the LLCs with the names of church employees. As a result of this disclosure by Mormon Leaks, 2 business managers who previously signed 13F forms resigned, both expressing deep concerns about what they were being asked to do. And the church's response? Well, they didn't even immediately change their reporting structure. Instead, they designated 2 other people to continue those business manager positions.
Mormon Leaks, you may have heard of them, a whistleblowing organization repeatedly making headlines, even sometimes forcing the church to react during that group's 2 short years in existence.
Most recently, leaking tapes alleging the rape of a missionary at the Missionary Training Center.
Yeah, with each new explosive leak, many wonder who's behind the site and what are they really after?
Heidi Hatch flew to Las Vegas to find out for us. Heidi?
Well, Shauna, KUTV organized a meeting with the 2 men who run this site. The founder lives in Las Vegas. His now partner and technical director lives on the East Coast. Our sit-down interview brought the 2 men together for their second ever face-to-face meeting.
I'm not some crazy ex-Mormon that wants everyone to leave the church and wants the church to be destroyed.
Ethan Dodge gets right to the point.
I just want the church to be accountable and other people to have informed decisions, be able to make informed decisions on their membership.
Along with founder Ryan McKnight, these 2 men are Mormon Leaks, based in Sin City.
And I'm just a regular guy.
Both born and raised LDS.
Someone very close to me works for the church.
Worried about protecting loved ones, Dodge worked anonymously for more than a year.
I personally am a believer that everyone can benefit from transparency, especially from an organization like your religion that has so much control over your life.
McKnight launched Mormon Leaks after playing a significant role in leaking the November 2015 policy restricting baptisms for the children of same-sex couples. Since then, both have made Mormon Leaks a big part of their life, though it's not what they eat, sleep, and breathe.
We're just a couple of regular guys. We've got regular jobs. We've got families. And, you know, sometimes if you haven't heard from us in a week or 2, it's probably because we're busy with other more important things.
Mormon Leaks is a hobby, if you will, and one without pay. While both have now left the LDS Church, they feel a calling to hold their former faith accountable.
We have what we believe is a clear mission, and that is to promote transparency in terms of finances, in terms of corporate policies and procedures, and in terms of sexual abuse.
Mormon Leaks wants the LDS Church to release more financial information, including where members' tithing money goes. Traditionally, 10% of what a family makes, which amounts to an estimated billions every year.
They push tithing and donations very hard. Excuse me. It upsets me when they make such broad statements like pay your tithing before you feed your family.
Mormon Leaks has posted documents with the base living allowance of general church authorities, amounting to $120,000 in 2014, estimated at $135,000 today, and how much on average decor inside each new temple costs.
There was one very notable item that was the rug that is in the bridal room.
The average bridal rug, $17,000.
I do think it's important that their membership is informed, not because it's inherently a bad thing, but if you're donating money and your donations are supporting people's salaries and they're supporting, you know, the decorations and things like that, I do think people have a right to know.
While Mormon Leaks will release budget matters relating to the church, they do draw a line on what is fair game.
We have received documents that are very personal in nature of, let's say, Quorum of the 12 Apostles, individual members, that we have not released and we never would release. And not because they're not interesting, but because they don't have any connection, or at least clear connection, to the institution of the church.
Many members of the LDS Church believe the leaks are not meant to help them.
Do you have an axe to grind?
I don't think I do, but I mean, then I would just say, like, what is the definition of an axe to grind? You know what I mean? I guess, do I think the church needs to be more transparent?
I am the last person to shut down leakers or information.
BYU journalism professor Joel Campbell believes Mormon Leaks has its place.
I've been known in my career as the freedom of information guy. I'm fought for open records in this state. So I'm the last person that wants to shut them down.
However,
I just want them to do their job ethically.
Campbell feels that because everything Mormon Leaks releases comes from an anonymous source, it flies in the face of journalistic standards.
Do you feel like everything you're doing at Mormon Leaks is legal?
Everything we're doing is legal. I understand that some people have problems with our ethics. What we do is definitely kind of in a gray area of ethics. There's no question about that.
Mormon Leaks doesn't solicit sources beyond the submit button on their site, but they admit they don't hold themselves to everyday journalism standards.
What we do is we curate documents that have public interest. Okay, and that is a service within the world of journalism.
The journalist title is important to Mormon Leaks because they were slapped with a cease and desist by the LDS Church after leaking some of their internal documents.
The attorney for Mormon Leaks says this site will not be censored. He says
their legal defense, journalism.
I am not here to say that leaks are bad for the United States or of even a private institution. Journalists are supposed to be checks on power. And I think leaks are helpful. It's just how you handle those leaks, I think, is what's important.
Mormon Leaks has no plans of stopping and will continue walking a fine ethical line, hoping to help the church they were raised in to be more open in the future.
I think the church does serve an important purpose in a lot of people's lives.
We recognize that the church has a right to have things kept private, just like any other organization does. But they also have, we believe, an ethical and a moral responsibility for certain things to be made public.
Now, Mormon Leaks tells me it holds itself to the same financial standards they want from the LDS Church. They post all of its financial information to its site. As for the legality of what they do, our BYU journalism professor told me leakers are protected by the First Amendment. It is important to note these leaks are coming from people who are inside the church or have access.
In 2019, the church is first contacted by the SEC over the reporting structure. And the SEC publishes a press release in February announcing charges against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Ensign Peak Advisors Incorporated for their decision to file forms for shell companies that obscured the church's portfolio and misstated Ensign Peak's control over the church's investment decision.
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its investment firm have reached a settlement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. They will now pay a $5 million penalty to the U.S. Treasury. This comes after the federal government expressed some concerns about how the church was reporting its investment portfolio and values. The church and its investment managers say they regret mistakes made, and they worked with the government over a period of time to reach this resolution.
And here's that Securities and Exchange Commission order. And it was at this time that Ensign Peak Advisors agreed to a $4 million fine, and the church itself agreed to a $1 million fine. In response to these charges, the church released the following statement.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its affiliated investment manager, Ensign Peak Advisors Incorporated, have settled a matter with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Investment managers who oversee a portfolio of public equities above a certain threshold are required to file Forms 13F with the SEC quarterly. These forms publicly disclose the names of the securities and their values. Since 2000, Ensign Peak received and relied upon legal counsel regarding how to comply with its reporting obligations while attempting to maintain the privacy of the portfolio. As a result, Ensign Peak established separate companies, LLCs, that each filed Forms 13F instead of a single aggregated filing. Ensign Peak and the church believe that all securities required to be reported were included in the filings by the separate companies. In June 2019, the SEC first expressed concern about Ensign Peak's reporting approach. Ensign Peak adjusted its approach and began filing a single aggregated report. Since that time, 13 quarterly reports have been filed in full accordance with SEC requirements. This settlement relates to how the forms were filed previously. Ensign Peak and the church have cooperated with the government over a period of time as we sought resolution. We affirm our commitment to comply with the law, regret mistakes made, and now consider this matter closed.
Funds weren't used the way they were appropriated to be used.
As a Christian church, we believe that someday Jesus Christ will return, but that's not why we have those resources. It's for the continuing operation and for the future.
Last night on 60 Minutes, right here on 2 News, a whistleblower speaks out after reporting the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to the Internal Revenue Service in 2019, questioning how money is being spent by the church. Bishop Christopher Waddell, who you just heard from, defended the church and their financial holdings and assets. David Nielsen, the man deemed as the whistleblower, was a senior portfolio manager at Ensign Peak Advisors for nearly a decade. Now, Ensign Peak is the affiliated investment management group for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After resigning from Ensign Peak in 2019, he filed a report with the IRS alleging the church had accumulated $100 billion in assets and used the money to bail out businesses with church ties and violated its religious tax exemption status. In the 60 Minutes report, the correspondent references information from Mormon Leaks, a whistleblowing organization focusing on exposing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some of the tone in the 60 Minutes report focuses on a lack of transparency, especially with those contributing to the church financially, known as tithing.
For me, though, to be honest with you, Brian, I don't care so much about whether or not they bailed out an insurance company or whatever it is they spent the money on. I mean, if they did something illegal, they should be held accountable. But what the real issue is here is the fact that they kept it secret. If they want to bail out Beneficial Life and it's not illegal, do it. They want to help build City Creek Mall and it's not illegal, do it. Just be transparent about it and let their stakeholders, which are the members, make fully informed decisions when providing financial support for the church. And I would guess that the majority of tithe payers in the church would continue paying tithing, even with the increased transparency, but at least the church would be on solid ethical ground.
So Ryan and I spoke at length. He's covered this subject for years. Mormon Leaks actually ended their coverage in 2022. I also spoke at length with a religious studies professor today. Insightful conversation. She mentioned the issue of sacred, secret, private, confidential. While not a business expert, but an expert in Mormon studies, she wasn't surprised to hear the dollar amount reached or exceeded $100 billion.
Choose what you get mad at them for. That because they are so good at business, or because they should be a religion and not be good at business, right?
What do you think this does moving forward for them? Does it do anything?
No. The question is, do the Latter-day Saints meet their moral obligation as well as their citizenship obligation in the way they handle their money? I think that as someone who used to work for the federal government as an attorney, you can tell by the IRS, not just reticence, because absolutely, religion is a problem area for the IRS on how to regulate that across the board for all the different kinds of religions that are in America. They're acting philanthropically and so the IRS has a tough job on that. But the IRS has expressed no interest in this case tells you something. And secondly, that the SEC essentially took no action that was satisfying at all to the person who filed this complaint. I suppose you could say the SEC doesn't know its job, but I tend to think it knows enough of its job to rise to the level of the kind of complaint that was made here about this amount of money and its action in the market. Again, that's the question here. The SEC isn't concerned about how they're investing their money necessarily. They're just trying to make sure they're not moving the market with how they're investing their money. And they essentially said the way you've organized how you're spending this money is the problem. That the brain behind all this money is hiding behind all these subsidiary countries. So you need to look at how you're organizing this. And that is a violation, but it's a parking ticket.
You may remember in February, the SEC charged Ensign Peak for 3 violations. Those were failing to file disclosure forms of church equity investments, filing forms for shell companies which obscured the church's portfolio, and filing forms mistaking Ensign Peak's control over the church's investments. Ensign Peak paid about $4 million in penalty to settle the charges. The church agreed to pay $1 million. I reached out to the SEC today. They would not comment further on this. We did also reach out to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints after hearing about this and seeing the whistleblower piece last night. They did release a statement that reads here in part. We'll highlight it for you so you can take a better look at some of this language. The church believes in being financially responsible by carefully ensuring it has adequate resources available to fulfill its divinely appointed responsibilities. They also went on to say it is unfortunate 60 Minutes sought to elevate a story based on unfounded allegations by a former employee who has a different view on how the church should manage its resources.
And folks, that's about it. That's the complete history of Ensign Peak Advisors. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. And what's your opinion about the church's controversial relationship with this investment company? Is there a lot of lying for the Lord going on? Or was this simply an accounting error or lawyers running amok? Thanks so much for joining me on another episode of the Mormon News Roundup. Always think celestial, and remember, no unhallowed hand can stop the Mormon News Roundup from progressing.
Money, money, money.